This is episode 107 of our road to Unicum, and today I review the 430. This is the tier 9 Russian medium tank in World of Tanks that leads to the 430U. It's really important to understand the armor profile. So the frontal hull armor provides about 200 millimeters of effective protection. But what's interesting to note is that the side hull armor is angled at about 50 degrees, and so this makes the tank really effective at side scraping, because if you look at shots that are hitting that angled side, it's at such a steep angle that they're going to bounce off, right? And so if you're side scraping, tanks can really only shoot you in a couple areas. One is this very thin sliver here underneath the turret on the shoulder. The turret itself is well protected. They can shoot you through their drive wheel, but what you can do is bait a lot of shots into that angled side hull armor. And the ability to side scrape pairs up really well with the 122 millimeter gun on this tank. It provides a pretty good alpha of 390. And so we're going to look at a couple battles here. First up is this tier 9 Himmelsdorf, so we can talk about playing this tank from a brawling perspective, and then we're going to look at a tier 10 Overlord battle where I leverage the good vision control of this tank. And it's worth noting the view range on the turret is actually really poor for a tier 9 medium tank. It's only 380 meters, so even with optics equipped, in order to get to 445 meters plus, I had to train both brothers in arms and situational awareness, and I believe recon as well. But you can still get to the 445 meter view range without food. I don't like running with food personally because I just hate getting set on fire. It is not only typically really damaging in terms of HP loss, but you tend to get damaged modules as well, which will force you to burn a repair kit and put that on cooldown. And I like having that repair kit available for tactical use to get out of situations. Okay, so the tank, even though it carries a pretty good armor profile, because it's flat, it also carries really good camo values. So you can brawl with this tank. You can also work opponents in terms of vision control. Obviously on a map like this there aren't as many vision opportunities, especially since I'm going to the top of the hill here. We're such close range, it's easy to spot everyone else. And then you can see there I'm backing out, side scraping, like exposing only that side hull armor and taking a snapshot. Now that's a risky shot. If that heavy tank, Russian heavy tanks tend to have very poor gun handling, so I was taking an educated bet that I would be more likely to penetrate him than the reverse. But you need to be careful against tanks that have high penetration guns, and especially tanks that have high accuracy guns, because they can potentially snapshot you. I wouldn't do it. Now notice here they've got a lot of tanks down on the D lane, but really to win hill the key is going to be cracking this IS-22. And so look, I wait until he gives me a good tracking shot, and then I'm able to put that through his rear drive wheel and also get the damage as well. And so sometimes people will, I think, on hill get over-focused with firing down like onto the D lane. And that can be at times the best target you have available. In this particular case, because that Russian heavy was the only one who pushed up onto hill, I saw that, went clockwise. I went clockwise around the tower, got behind him, where he's a heavy tank. He can really, this is pretty much true for any tank. You can only meaningfully angle your armor, your turret, your hull to deal with incoming fire from one direction. Okay, so as you may have been watching on the mini map, we only had one heavy tank go down on the A line, and they pushed in force and simply pushed his face, and they just out DPM'd him, right? And so I'm turning around because we've got to stop the bleeding. And then I laid a trap here for the Progetto 46 because I read the map and correctly guessed that he was going to come around. So I played for the first shot advantage because I'm side scraping, and there you can see like I'm causing him to waste a shell into this angled upper side hull armor. And then because the Renegade is here, I know we can go ahead and push down on this Progetto. The one thing to be careful of is, it looks like the AMX heavy tank, okay, there's the T-30, that they're also going on the inside ramp. And so that means that most likely this Progetto is going to be isolated. And so if that's the case, then we should really go down and bully him. While he can put 720 damage in terms of burst, once he does that, he's got a very long reload, and I've got bully armor. So what I want to do is close the gap to him and face hug him. Now I've gotten kind of in a bad habit of sometimes like ramming tanks with the Russian mediums, and in a battle like this you'll see the 61 damage that I took from ramming him. Actually later I really could have used those hit points later. And so obviously I didn't know that at the time, but there are a couple tanks down here. Notice I take my time side scraping and pulling out, right? Just in case they were looking this way. I'm maximizing my chance of bouncing the incoming shells. And then, so it looks like we've kind of helped to stall the bleeding. Although right there, Waffenträger was setting a trap. He knew I was going to come around the corner. And so I'm tucking in my front again, side scraping. You got to be really disciplined about doing that. It makes a huge difference. And had I known that Waffenträger was going to keep going in the northeast corridor, I probably would have switched over to high explosive. I thought he was going to duck into the alleyway like where the Mutz is going right now. The interesting thing with this battle is, we've had a lead for a long time, but we got to press the advantage here. This Mutz is trying to run away, and he's actually going to gap me here, right? And so one thing to note is, this tank has a top speed of 50 kilometers per hour, and it also, because it carries so much armor, it's a little bit sluggish in terms of its mobility and acceleration, right? So it's very much your typical heavium. The faster medium tanks will outrun it in a foot race, and certainly the light tanks. And so, I do need to give chase, and there's a situation happening over on the zero line which I'm paying very close attention to. Now, notice I didn't go after the T-30. There are a couple reasons why. My hit points are so low, I have to assume that he has a top gun that has an alpha value of 750, so he can one-shot me. And moreover, the Mutz was running, he's one-shot, and then I was hoping we would get the kill here on the zero lane. But it turns out that their defender outlasted a heavy and a medium, and so now I'm facing a 1 versus 2 situation here. I'm going to set up here for a shot that really the defender's not giving me anything to shoot at meaningfully, right? And I can't stay where I was because there already could fire east along that B lane and hit me. And what I'm going to tell you, I'm telling this Indian Panther, like, back up, dude. And I just don't get the thought process, right? If they're going to push down onto us, you don't want to be sitting in the open. And the Indian Panther, if he's just only exposing his turret, that's a limited amount of exposure. So now the Indian Panther gets picked off. I was showing my hull there. That was a little bit of a risky play in case the Mud snapshotted and got lucky. And now, now most of my hull is either hidden behind the rock or there's a front piece of it just barely hanging out. I'm not bothering, if I had the time, I would reposition into side scraping, but I'm laying a trap here. This guy keeps poking out perpendicular, flat, like that, which was a really super not smart thing to do since I've been hanging out here, right? He has to assume that I'm ready to fire. Now, like I was saying, if I had the time, I would have side scraped, right? But because I wanted, this gun is very derpy in terms of gun handling. This is the case with, a fair number of the larger caliber guns. It just doesn't, it takes a while to aim in, and kind of has poor gun handling. So, you got to be careful of that. Now, this 430 was camping for the vast majority of the battle, and players like this actually can be a problem late in a match. I've been really aggressive, already have over 4,000 damage, and kind of helping to carry my team, but facing a player like this late can be a bit dicey, if they're working with a high number of HP because they were playing conservative. But I've landed 2 really good shots, take my time here, put that in to that lower plate, and now we've pulled even. I just need this Emil to stay alive with me. I mean, the main thing is, I don't know, he's moving, so he's not AFK. But he's kind of sitting out in the open, right? And that's not a very wise thing to do. Now, it would be okay, his tank is such thin side hull armor, he can't really side scrape, and he's sitting open enough, right, in a gap where he could have been shot from already with a shell coming in from the southeast. So we kind of give up his hit points, and I'm kind of waffling here in terms of what I should do. What I should have done is stayed at the corner here, so I have the first shot advantage on the defender who's trying to push up, and then I should have taken longer to put that shell in. But the problem is I was originally going to try to flank him, but this tank is too slow to do that, right? And this isn't, like I said, it's not a fast heavy. You can flex and get around the map, certainly not the fastest tank. And then here I get lucky right there. He low rolls his shot. Again, if I could have had some of those hit points back from ramming the progetto, if I had known that it was going to be this close and I was going to be stuck in single digit hit points, I would have been more careful. And the main danger I have now, and that would have been the case even if I had another 65 hit points, whatever, a splash from the Artie will kill me. So you can notice every time I reach one of these corners, I'm just pulling out side scrape, being very careful. And the thing to keep in mind is a lot of Arties tend to have kind of a box-like shape, and so you can get to a point where you can spot the corners of their turret, the edges of their head, even before their gun can sight you, right? And so what I'm doing now is I'm going counterclockwise because I'm trying to maximize the distance that I'm going to spot him. I've got really good camo. He's an Artie. He probably doesn't have optics equipped, has crappy view range. So if I can outspot him and get that first shot advantage, that's going to be huge, especially since, I would not have to be this careful if I had, say, if I had 500 hit points, I'd just press W and go find him and kill him, because it would be highly unlikely that he'd be able to take me out with one shot. And you could definitely argue I shouldn't have run those fuel tanks and set them on fire, because if there are other players who are still watching this match, they could potentially see those things being destroyed, right? Like I've actually, after I've died in a match, if it's close, I'll often stay around and ping the map and help kind of read situations and communicate, or notice things like trees being knocked down, canisters exploding, right? And this already was setting up a pretty clever trap for me, because this brick building here was completely obscuring my view until I got pretty close to him, right? And so if I had come around the south side of the map, who knows? He might have been able to get the first shot advantage on me, but as it was, I was able to pull this out. Really close map, really shows the value of the armor on this tank, as far as the side scraping technique. So there are a couple of things worth mentioning. The penetration, the AP silver ammo penetration is 238. That's not really good. It's not awful. There are guns with 220 penetration or below. For the tier 9s at this tier, I certainly would feel much more comfortable if that value was in the 240s or 250s. But it's workable. If you're aiming into weak spots, you can do it. And a lot of times you can aim in, even with crappy gun handling, if you're pre-aimed, and especially you're going to watch in this tier 10 battle, I'm going to leverage the camo of this tank and the fact that I've got over 445 meters of view range to take my time aiming in and get a lot of shots. Like right there, great example. I got to this spot just a touch before that 430 and was pre-aimed where he would be likely to poke, and I got the shot off. Now, if you're wondering why I outspotted him, could be any number of things. It could be I think I stopped moving and he was still moving, so I get stationary camo values versus his movement base. That could be one. The other thing is he may not be running optics. Most players, if they're not completely ignorant, run optics on mediums. Like pretty much it's a requirement for any tier 6 and above. Really any medium tank you should do it, because the distance, the further away you can see things to shoot before they see you, that's game changing. The other thing too is he may not have his crewed up as much. Like I said, to get to 445 meters of view range in this tank, I had to take Brothers in Arms and situational awareness and recon, right? But that's only because of the really poor 380 meters of base view range. But I think it's fair, it was interesting before playing this tank. I've heard a lot of opinions. People think that this tank is overpowered. I think the crappy gun handling and the kind of slight sluggishness of it does help to balance it out. It's definitely a very functional tank. I find because of the armor profile, it's reasonably forgiving. The gun handling can make it rough in certain situations because the gun will flake out on you, and certainly in medium, I value gun handling in any tank, but especially for lights and mediums where you're going to be doing a lot of snapshotting. So the Object 430 has one of the easiest grinds in the entire game. So there is only one gun, there's only one turret, so there's no grinding for those. And then the great thing is that the stock suspension will allow you to mount the upgraded engine and 3 equipment modules. So this is one of those tanks, and whenever this happens on a tank, I always research the suspension last. Typically speaking, I prioritize getting to the first gun with functional penetration and getting the turret, then getting the engine, then the suspension, and then the radio last. Generally speaking, you'll get some radio upgrades from the prior tiers, and having the max radio is not really that big of a deal in terms of a performance characteristic. But like you want to generally research tracks later if you can, right? Tracks do help, in terms of having some extra track hit points and helping with the traverse, but unless you want to, either, it's like, this is the thing, if you grind out the suspension first, then you're delaying, for example, in this tank, when you're going to get the engine, and having the engine is really important because of the sluggish acceleration, right? Like the engine, as far as I understand it, the engines won't change the top speed, but they will affect your acceleration, which is how long it takes you to get up to that top speed. Now, if you've been watching, I want you to think about what would you have done. Like I exited that area I was in over by F8, right? But what would you have done in this situation, right? And what a lot of people would do is they would go over to where the KV4 is, just move 1 square east and brawl. And granted, I did get spotted and I took 1 shot, but back here there are tons of bushes and I can garden with trees, right? And it's been long enough I've probably dropped from their view, so I can look at all those trees. Like, there's no way they're going to see me when I get that sweet kill shot on the SU-130 PM, right? But the reason why I didn't go to over where the KV4 is, obviously if I'm brawling in close range, they're going to see me. They have a numbers advantage, and it's just going to become a DPM race, right? And moreover, by swinging counterclockwise to come to the south, there are a couple things. One, I'm in front of the Artie, so I'm helping to keep him alive, keeping them backed off, because otherwise they could just push down the 0 lane, right? The other reason is that I want to get perpendicular fire, so I'm firing on the sides of a lot of these tanks. It makes it much easier to penetrate. And really what I'm trying to do is just stall. I'm trying to buy time because we've won the Western Plateau Brawl, and so what I have to assume is that these tanks that have won on their side the 9-0 brawl area, that they're going to push up. So I get a sweet tracking shot there on the Centurion, back up a little bit just in case I get spotted. Already hits him, which is great, so that continues to keep the Centurion tracked, and that's going to allow me to take my time in because he's immobilized and finish him off. Now watch what happens on the western side of the map, the mini-map. And like for a game like this, you have to keep, for any battle, but especially one that's close like this, and where one side is one side of the map and the other side is the other side of the map. So you can see the WZ, his dot, last spot location just shifted to the west, and the 430. So it looks like they are flexing back to the west, which is the right play, by the way. They shouldn't push into blind corridor lanes because, I've got a really high camo value of about 36 with the crew that I've got in here. And so they've pivoted back counterclockwise to challenge our western push, and they're largely eliminating it. And so now I have to push up, and our T-54 has done the right thing in my opinion. So he's gone bowl, and obviously bowl is not as effective if you don't have gun depression, but at least he's able to go over there and spot. It is a little bit risky if you go into the bowl and you don't have other friendly players around the edges of the bowl. Their tanks can go up and over the lip of the bowl and they can dogpile you, right? And so I do it, but I do it only in certain situations where I'm trying to be careful, right? And I know that I'm going to have some Overwatch fire protecting me. Okay, so this Tortoise, we tapped him on the side earlier for a shot. I get a nice, sweet cupola shot. And again, the fact that I can take my time aiming in because this tank has such really good camo offsets this. You can see this horrific aim time. It's so long, right? Okay, cool. 2 shots into the cupola, and we've got to be careful here. We've now lost the western push. Our Striv is inexplicably trying to push up a non-turreted tank that has great camo, but really squishy thin side armor and really can get penetrated by a lot of high caliber guns, and especially heat, since heat doesn't bounce the same way that AP and APCR does. So I'm trying to get some kill shots into the cupola of that Tortoise, and you can see I've switched over to high explosives because I just need to touch the top of this tank and this Tortoise is going to die. So I don't need AP here, so switching over here is the right thing to do. The last 38 hit points and that Tortoise is dead. Now this AMX, his frontal profile is really strong. If he turns, you can see there on the side of his turret, there are areas on the side of his turret when he turns his head that I could potentially penetrate, and he's blind firing, but obviously this is like one of the hard things. If you're trying to blind fire a ridge with like lots of trees, it can be hard to get the elevation right. Like his shot sailed over me, and that last shot, it just didn't quite go where I wanted to. The base accuracy of this gun is only .42, so that's really bad for a medium. Right, so it requires some patience. It just means the shots aren't always going to sail where you want them to, but you just got to keep putting yourself in a position where you can keep your gun hot, right? And there was a point in the match early on, where I was sitting over by that F8 area where I was waiting too long, right? You can't be too passive for too long, and you look like even as active as reasonably active I've been, 3,300 damage already. We've blown the lead. And that heavy tank, some of the tanks in this game, the German heavies and the French heavies tend to be really tall. And if they rush you and you're in a Russian medium, you can get side by side with them and they can't shoot anything on your hull except they can only target your turret, which is a terrible thing to try to target when someone's kind of rubbing up against the side of you like that, because it's almost impossible to aim into the cupola and get a shot. Now, I don't want to push into the T-54 and Striv, mostly because two things. I don't want to push in my one gun versus their two. More of the 430 might have flanking shots on me, right? So this is really, you got to recognize when you're in a bad situation. If I fire on the T-54 and Striv and that object 430 is still in that area, I'm going to eat perpendicular fire. It's a no-win situation, right? So I need to back out. And this is, I cannot stress how important this is. A lot of players, when they win a flank, they just blindly keep pushing forward. You should only do so if it makes tactical sense and it will give you map control, right? But like you guys saw earlier, when I helped stall their push on the 9-0 line, their tanks flexed, they went counterclockwise, and they crushed our tanks that were circling in the northwest corner of the map, circling clockwise, and they pretty much wiped that entire push, right? So I can now come up here. Again, the 430 is still not lit, and he was the person that I shot twice at the very beginning of the game, and so you're going to see that factor in later. Early damage helps you to, pull off carries late. And our 430 had done a really great thing. He had taken out the turreted WZ Chinese tank destroyer who had pushed up solo. And that's like one of those mistakes. It's one thing to have a tank that has some bully armor, but if you push too far deep and you don't have people covering your flanks, you can get picked off. Now, this is a great opportunity for us to pick off their 430 who's, all the way down there on the beach. But, our Striv just sitting on that shelf is totally exposed to arty fire. Just really poor positioning. Really, the Striv, in my opinion, should have been playing the middle of the map, near the edges of the bowl, or just waiting to snipe. There's so much that he could have done, but pushing up along the beach really is the worst possible thing in that situation. And thankfully, our 430U here finishes off their 430. So we've pulled it back. We're dead even now, and we have the better map positioning. I'm largely intact in terms of hit points because I've been playing the vision control game, right? I mean, I ate one shot when I circled counterclockwise to the south part of the map, but it was worth it because from that position of strength, I was able to take out their Centurion, their SU-130, get a shot into their AMX Heavy and into the Tortoise, right? So you look at the tactical value I gained by rotating to the south. And if I hadn't fired when I was moving to the south, then I probably wouldn't have been spotted at all. But there are times, like especially if I feel like a team is losing, I feel like I've got to get my gun in play. Now here, it just bounced a shot off of the Striv. It might have bounced either off the side of my turret or off the side of my hull, but I really wasn't giving him much of a target, right? And that's, the person who's closer to the hardcover can dictate exposure between two tanks, right? Because I can see his full tank, and the nice thing is with a 122 millimeter gun, I can overmatch his 40 millimeter armor, and that's something you can't do with AP and APCR for a lot of the Russian medium tanks that have gun caliber that's lower than 121, right? So the greater than triple overmatch, the way that it works is if the caliber of your gun is greater than 3 times the thickness of the armor that you're hitting with AP and APCR, you'll never bounce, even at extreme angles, right? And so their Striv now is, he's in a terrible position. Like I said, we've got map control because we've got them pinchered, right? And so the Striv can only face his armor in one direction to protect himself. And get a nice shot there in the T-54, and then right here, he hits me through my turret. And I could tell from his prior shot that he was firing heat, because when the shell hits the ground, you can see it kind of sizzle, or if it hits your tank, you'll see here it sizzles, right? And obviously in the notifications log in the bottom left of the screen, you can see he fired heat. And, I was properly positioned, right? I was hull down, only showing my turret, moving backwards, but he shot me with heat through the face. And that's going to happen. The turret cheeks are penable by heat, even though this is fairly well protected. And so you just got to respect that. When I face a lot of tanks, as soon as I'm aware that they're spamming premium ammo, that's life in the big city with World of Tanks, and you've just got to account for it. But in this case now, I can go ahead and bully him, right? He's going to need a few shots to kill me, potentially 3 shots. And so, I just need 1 shot to probably finish him off. And so I could bully him. And, he's trying to delay this and find a shot. But by circling around, I'm setting him up for the kill shot from my friendly 430, who did a really nice job. I mean, he had a nice job there in terms of the 7 kills. He did a great job finishing tanks off. My main contribution was making sure we were able to stay in the match and not totally get overwhelmed. So I will be reviewing the 430U, Leopard PTA, a bunch of other tanks coming up. Let me know what you guys think about this tank in the video. Take care.